Thomas Banks stood at the panoramic window of his office on the 23rd floor and watched the twinkling lights of Dunbar. He had opened his first restaurant here 27 years ago. Now there were 15 of them, scattered all along the East Coast, each bringing in a steady income. "Thomas, you're not listening to me." Olivia was sitting in a leather chair, absent-mindedly flipping through the pages of a manuscript. He turned around, looking at his wife. 49 years old, and still retaining a slender figure and a particular elegance. A beautiful woman, always attracting attention. Her impeccably tailored clothes and natural grace made others turn around. "I'm sorry. I was thinking about business." Thomas came to the table. "What were you saying?" "That we deserved a vacation. 25 years together, can you believe it?" Olivia set the manuscript aside. "A Caribbean cruise would be the perfect way to celebrate our silver anniversary." Thomas hesitated for a moment. They'd met at a literary soiree. He, the ambitious owner of a one-man restaurant, and she, an aspiring literary agent. He came for the networking, she for the duty. Their conversation about the culinary preferences of the protagonist of some novel dragged on until dawn. A year later, they were married. 2 more years later, their son Jason was born. He was now living in Europe, doing research in neurobiology. He didn't call much, came back even less. "What are you thinking about again?" Olivia's voice brought him back to reality. "About how we met," he smiled. "You're right. We deserve this cruise." Olivia brightened, walked over and kissed him on the cheek. "I've already booked a cabin," she said. "We sail in 3 weeks." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "And if I'd said no? I'd figure out a way to convince you." She winked and left the office. Olivia had always been like that, determined, knowing exactly what she wanted. It was a trait that had charmed him the first time he'd met her. Over time, it had been the cause of many conflicts. Olivia didn't want to be just a restaurateur's wife. She built her own career, becoming one of the most respected literary agents in the country. Over the last few years, they grew increasingly distant from each other. Each lived his own life. A shared home, occasional dinners alone, and polite conversations were what remained of their marriage. Perhaps this cruise was what they really needed. 3 weeks flew by in a flurry of activity. Thomas handed things over to the managers. Olivia negotiated temporary replacements with her co-workers. He watched his wife carefully select outfits for the trip, spending hours browsing fashion magazines and ordering online. On the eve of her departure, Thomas noticed Olivia's unusual enthusiasm. She was constantly checking her phone, sometimes laughing quietly as she read the messages. "Something funny?" he asked at dinner. "The author sends funny comments on the edits," she replied, not taking her eyes off the screen. Thomas nodded, but something in her voice seemed false. Too quick an answer, too careless a tone. In 25 years of marriage, he'd learned to discern the nuances of her moods. On the day of sailing, they arrived at the port of Miami. The Caribbean Pearl, a huge cruise ship, towered over the pier. 14 decks, 5 restaurants, 3 pools, a spa, and a casino. Their stateroom was on deck 11, with a spacious balcony and ocean view. "Wow!" Thomas whistled as they entered the room. "You didn't skimp." "It's our anniversary," Olivia smiled. 25 years only happens once." For the first 2 days, they enjoyed their vacation. They ate breakfast on the balcony, sunbathed by the pool, and dined at the best restaurants on the ship. Thomas noted how relaxed Olivia looked. She was laughing, flirting with him as if they were a young couple again. And yet something was wrong. Olivia was away a lot. She had to call the author, or check the mail, or buy something at the ship's store. Each time she came back slightly agitated, with a slight blush on her cheeks. On the 3rd day, Thomas woke up alone. Olivia was not in the cabin. The clock read 7 in the morning. He stepped out onto the balcony, looking around the deck. Several of the early passengers had already taken lounge chairs, preparing for a new day in the Caribbean sun. Olivia was not among them. Thomas showered, dressed, and went in search of her. He circled the pool, the gym, the spa. His wife was nowhere to be found. In the main restaurant, he grabbed a coffee and sat at a table by the window, looking out at the vast blue of the ocean. Olivia showed up almost an hour later. Fresh-faced, in a white summer dress, she sat easily across from him. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she smiled. "I decided not to wake you up and went to morning yoga." "I didn't know you were into yoga." Thomas looked at his wife carefully. "I've never seen you practicing at home." "That's the beauty of a vacation. You can try new things," she called the waiter. "I'll have a fruit salad and green tea, please." That evening they went to the casino. Olivia looked stunning in a black cocktail dress. Thomas watched her betting, laughing, talking to the other players. Suddenly, her face changed. She froze, looking somewhere over his shoulder. Thomas turned around and saw a tall man heading toward their table. "Olivia?" The stranger spoke up. "Olivia Banks? Unbelievable." She stood up, slightly confused, but quickly pulled herself together. "Philip? Philip Ray? What are you doing here?" The man was smiling broadly. "A little vacation before the new school term. You haven't changed. You're still as beautiful as ever." Thomas stood up, extending his hand. "Thomas Banks, Olivia's husband." Yes, of course." Philip shook his hand vigorously. "We met about 10 years ago at a book fair in New York. I'm a professor of literature at Columbia University. Olivia helped me publish my first book." "Of course." Thomas nodded, though he didn't remember the man at all. "Why don't we celebrate this meeting?" Philip suggested, pointing to the bar. "My treat." They moved to the bar where Philippe ordered a bottle of champagne. Thomas watched his wife chatting animatedly with the professor about books, authors, some mutual acquaintances. Her eyes glistened. She touched Philippe's hand now and then, laughing at his jokes. Thomas felt superfluous. "How long have you two known each other?" he asked, interrupting their lively dialogue. Olivia and Philip exchanged quick glances. "We met at the beginning of my career," Olivia replied. "Philip was an aspiring author, and I was an aspiring agent." "Olivia saved me," Philip added. "Without her, my book would never have seen the light of day. She's a brilliant editor and a terrific agent." "I know," Thomas replied dryly. "I've been married to her for 25 years. There was an awkward pause for a moment. 25 years? Philip raised his glass. "That's worth celebrating. To your silver anniversary." They finished their champagne, and Thomas suggested they go back to the cabin. Olivia seemed about to object, but then agreed. When she said goodbye, she exchanged cabin numbers with Philip. "Be sure to meet tomorrow for lunch," the professor said. "We have so much to discuss." In the cabin, Thomas poured himself a whiskey. "It's a strange coincidence, don't you think?" he said. "Being on the same ship as an old acquaintance." Olivia shrugged. "Small world. Besides, cruises are popular with teachers on vacation." She went to the bathroom, and Thomas sat on the balcony, staring out at the dark water. Something was bugging him. Too much Olivia had been surprised to see Philip. Too quickly they had found common ground. It was as if they were continuing a conversation that had been interrupted more recently than 10 years ago. He heard the sound of an incoming message. Olivia's phone was on the nightstand. Thomas hesitated. He'd never checked her messages, respecting his wife's privacy. But now, something was nudging him. The phone screen lit up again. "I can't wait for tomorrow. It's so weird seeing you with him. F." Thomas froze. F. Philip. Without waiting for his wife to return, he picked up her phone and opened the messages. The correspondence with Philip had been going on for months. Dozens, hundreds of messages. Thomas scrolled back a few screens and stopped at a message from 3 weeks ago. "Booked a cabin on the Caribbean Pearl. Leaving in 3 weeks. Can't wait. Love you." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. He heard the bathroom door open and quickly put the phone back down. Olivia came out in a silk robe, her hair damp from the shower. "Are you still awake?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "Did something happen?" Thomas shook his head. "No, nothing. Just enjoying the view." He took a sip of whiskey and smiled, trying to make it look natural. Tomorrow would be an interesting day ahead of us. The morning began with a serene breakfast on the balcony of the cabin. Thomas pretended nothing had happened, watching his wife's every move carefully. Olivia seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone and smiling at her thoughts. "You're in a good mood," Thomas said, spreading jam on his toast. "Is that a bad thing?" She looked up. "After all, we're on vacation, celebrating our anniversary." "Of course not," he smiled. "What are your plans for today?" Olivia sipped her coffee, thinking for a moment. "I want to attend a morning lecture about the local islands, then maybe a spa. What about you?" "Thought I'd play a round of golf," Thomas replied. "Why don't we meet for lunch?" "Actually," Olivia hesitated. "I promised Philip I'd join him for lunch. It's been so long since we've seen each other, and he needs my professional advice on his new book." "I see." Thomas nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "I'll see you at dinner then." After breakfast, Olivia left for the lecture, and Thomas waited until she was out of sight and followed her. There was indeed a lecture. In the theater room of the cruise ship, an elderly historian was speaking about the Caribbean's colonial past. Olivia sat in the third row, listening intently. Thomas sat in the far corner, watching her. After 45 minutes, the lecture was over. Olivia didn't go to the spa as promised. Instead, she went up to the upper deck and took a table in the shade of a large umbrella. Waiting for someone, she tapped her fingers nervously on the table. Thomas settled down at a newspaper at a neighboring table, wearing sunglasses. 10 minutes later, Philip showed up. He kissed Olivia on the cheek, keeping his hand on her shoulder longer than was necessary to greet an old acquaintance. They spoke quietly, leaning toward each other. Thomas couldn't hear their conversation over the noise of the waves and the laughter of the other passengers. After half an hour, the pair rose and headed inside the ship. Thomas, keeping his distance, followed them. They passed through the main lobby, turned down a corridor leading to the cabins. They stopped at a door with the number 524, Philip's quarters. The professor looked around, then quickly swiped his card across the lock. Olivia ducked inside, Philip following her. Thomas froze a few feet from the door, feeling anger rising inside. All doubt fell away. His wife, with whom they'd lived for 25 years, was seeing another man, cheated, betrayed. He walked to the door and listened. At first, there were only indistinct voices, then Olivia's laughter, that special laugh he hadn't heard in years. Then the conversation grew louder, as if they'd gotten closer to the door. 3 years of our secret. Philip's voice sounded muffled. Did you ever think we'd end up here? Never, Olivia answered. When you suggested organizing this chance meeting, I thought it was crazy. But now, it's so exciting. Doesn't your husband suspect anything? Olivia laughed. Thomas? He's too busy with his restaurants. Besides, this cruise is the perfect cover. He thinks we're celebrating an anniversary and I'm celebrating freedom. Thomas felt nauseous. 3 years. 3 whole years she'd been seeing this man behind his back. Scheduling meetings, lying, pretending to be a loving wife. He stepped quietly away from the door and headed for the nearest bar. He ordered a double whiskey, drank it in a gulp, and ordered another. The bitter drink burned his throat, but it couldn't dull the pain of betrayal. Back in his cabin, Thomas found Olivia's cell phone on the nightstand. She must have forgotten it in her haste. This time, he didn't hesitate to unlock the device. Fortunately, they knew each other's passwords, a relic of more trusting times. The correspondence with Philip was endless. It had started 3 years ago with a discussion of a manuscript and had gradually grown into something more. The messages became more and more intimate, the plans for meetings more and more detailed. They met in hotels when Olivia was supposedly traveling to conferences or meetings with authors. They used conspiratorial phrases, invented code words. The last few months had been spent planning the cruise. Get a cabin on the same ship, But not next to ours, Olivia wrote. We'll stick to the plan of a chance meeting. Thomas won't guess anything. Thomas leaned back in his chair, feeling his inner world crumble. 25 years of marriage had become a farce. He remembered how happy they had been in the early years, how they had celebrated the birth of their son, the first successes in their careers, the purchase of a house. When had it all changed? At what point had they become strangers to each other? He flipped through the photos on Olivia's phone. Dozens of pictures with Philip, in restaurants, hotels, parks. Many of them were of them hugging, kissing. They looked happy, in love, just like he and Olivia used to be. Thomas deleted all the compromising photos and put his phone back. Then he pulled a bottle of scotch from the bar and poured himself a full glass. The alcohol dulled the pain, but fueled the anger. He remembered how he'd provided for Olivia all these years, supported her career, been a faithful husband, and all that time she'd been... It was getting dark outside the window. Thomas heard the cabin door open. Olivia entered, flushed and slightly out of breath. "You're here," she smiled. "I'm sorry I missed lunch. Philip and I were so engrossed in discussing his new book that we lost track of time." "I'm sure you did," Thomas replied dryly. "I hope it was a fascinating discussion." She nodded, not noticing the sarcasm. It was fascinating. "Oh yes, don't forget, tonight is our celebratory dinner. The captain is throwing a special evening for couples celebrating anniversaries." Thomas watched in silence as she picked out her outfit, put on her makeup, styled her hair. Who was she trying so hard for? For him or for Philip, whom she would inevitably meet at the dinner? The evening at the restaurant was tense. Thomas drank more than usual, answering offhandedly. Olivia glanced restlessly at the neighboring tables, searching for Philip with her eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked when he'd downed his third glass of wine. "You seem a little strange tonight." "Just thinking about our marriage," Thomas replied, pouring more wine. 25 years is no joke, a quarter of a century together, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Olivia smiled nervously. "Of course, darling. We've been through a lot together." "And kept a lot of things from each other?" Thomas looked intently into her eyes. She looked away. "What do you mean?" At that moment, Philippe approached their table. He looked elegant in his dark suit, as if he had prepared himself for the dinner. "What a pleasant meeting," he exclaimed. "May I join you?" Without waiting for an answer, he sat down next to Olivia. Thomas noticed how their knees touched under the table, how Olivia moved slightly toward Philip. These small gestures, imperceptible to outsiders, screamed of the closeness they shared. Thomas drank in silence as they talked about literature, new authors, the latest trends in publishing. Every smile Olivia smiled, every laugh she made echoed with pain in his heart. After dinner, the captain invited all the couples celebrating anniversaries to come out to the center deck for a traditional dance. The orchestra played a slow tune, and the couples twirled in a dance under the starry sky. Thomas put his arm around Olivia, feeling like he was holding a stranger in his arms. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "About us," he answered. "About how things have changed. Remember how we danced at our wedding?" She nodded. "Of course I do. You stepped on my dress and almost fell over." "Do you remember what you said then?" he continued. Olivia frowned. "That I would always be there to support you." "And you kept that promise?" His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. She pulled away, looking at him anxiously. "Thomas, what's going on?" "You and Philip," he said simply. "I know everything." Olivia's face went pale. She opened her mouth, about to say something, but Thomas continued. 3 years, Olivia. 3 years you've been seeing him behind my back, planning meetings, lying to me, laughing at me. Thomas, I can explain. Explain what? His voice rose. A few couples turned on them. How you've been cheating on me all this time? How you organized this cruise to go out with him? How you called me a blind fool who suspects nothing?" Olivia grabbed his arm. "Let's talk about this in the cabin." Thomas wrenched his hand away roughly. "I don't want to go anywhere with you." He turned around and headed for the bar. He ordered a whiskey, took a swig, ordered another. Olivia didn't follow him. Through the crowd, he could see her talking quietly to Philip, gesticulating desperately. Toward midnight, the deck emptied. Most of the passengers had dispersed to their cabins or moved on to the nightclubs and casinos. Thomas sat in a chaise lounge looking out over the dark ocean waters. He was drunk, but the pain and anger did not subside, only grew stronger. He heard light footsteps and turned around. Olivia was coming toward him, wrapped in a shawl. "We need to talk," she said, sitting down beside him. "It's not what you think." "Really?" He grinned bitterly. "I've seen your messages. I've seen the pictures. What's wrong there?" Olivia sighed. "I didn't mean to deceive you. It just happened." "Happened 3 years in a row?" He shook his head. "Don't insult me further. You're distant," she said quietly but insistently. "Immersed in your restaurants, your business. I became invisible in my own house. Philippe showed up when I felt alone. And you decided that cheating was the solution?" Thomas stood up. 25 years of marriage and you're throwing it away for— "I love him," Olivia interrupted. "This isn't just a fling. We were planning—" She faltered, but it was too late. "Planned what?" Thomas stepped toward her. "Leave together? Abandon me? Or maybe you were hoping I'd never find out and you could live on 2 fronts. I was going to ask for a divorce after the cruise." She lowered her head. "It was supposed to be our last vacation together." Thomas felt something finally break inside. His whole world, everything he'd built over the years, was crumbling before his eyes. "One last vacation," he repeated, walking over to the railing. "How generous of you." Olivia walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't?" He turned around sharply. "You've been planning this for years, letting me think we were okay, that we had a future." He grabbed her by the shoulders, feeling the alcohol and anger clouding his mind. "Thomas, you're drunk." Olivia tried to free herself. "Let go of me. How could you?" He shook her, not controlling the force. "I gave you my whole life." She pushed him away and took a step back. "Stop it! You're hurting me." "Hurt you?" He laughed bitterly. "Do you know what pain is? 25 years of living a lie. That's what pain is." Thomas moved closer to her again. Olivia backed away until her back was against the railing. They were on the top deck, high above the black waters of the ocean. "Thomas, please," her voice trembled. "Let's talk tomorrow when you're sober." "No," he shook his head. "No tomorrow. It's over, Olivia." She tried to step around him, but Thomas blocked her path. There was such rage in his eyes that Olivia grabbed the railing in fright. "Stay back," she said. "You're scaring me." Something in her voice, in her posture, finally broke his self-control. He saw not his wife, but the traitor who had ruined his life. Without thinking, he pushed her. Olivia lost her balance. Her eyes widened in horror, and she tried to grab for his shirt, but her fingers only slipped through the fabric. An instant later, she disappeared overboard with a short scream cut short by a splash. Thomas froze, unable to believe what he had just done. He rushed to the railing and looked down. The black water had swallowed Olivia without a trace, not a splash, not a movement, just the vast, dark ocean, the depths of which he knew from the liner's information brochures were inhabited by sharks. Panic overwhelmed him. He looked around quickly. The deck was empty. No one had seen what had happened. Tom hurried back to his cabin, checking for security cameras along the way. In the cabin, he locked the door and leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. What had he done? How could this have happened? It had been an accident. He hadn't meant to. Or did he mean to? Deep down, he knew the answer, and it scared him even more. Thomas rushed into the bathroom and vomited. With trembling hands, he washed his face, looking at his pale reflection in the mirror. A murderer. He had become a murderer. He had to act fast. He grabbed Olivia's phone, deleted all messages from Philip, then erased their social media correspondence. Rummaging through her things, he found a notebook with some notes about Philip and burned it in the sink. Thomas then lay on the bed, trying to calm down and come up with a plan. What would he say when Olivia's disappearance was discovered? How would he explain her absence? He decided he'd claim she hadn't returned to the cabin after dinner. He'd say they'd had a fight, and he thought she'd gone to a friend's house. Yeah, he just didn't know where she was. Maybe she'd killed herself. No, it's best not to assume suicide. Just an accident. She was drunk, went out on the deck at night to get some air and... Thomas closed his eyes, but Olivia's face at the moment of the fall was in front of him. The horror, the disbelief, the realization of the inevitable. He'd killed the woman he'd lived with for 25 years, the mother of his son, his first love. What had he done? Thomas awoke to a persistent pounding on the door. The clock read 9 in the morning. His head was splitting with a hangover, but his memories of last night were crystal clear. He rose slowly, trying to calm the trembling in his hands, and opened the door. Behind it stood a cruise ship security officer in a white uniform with gold patches. "Mr. Banks?" the officer asked. "Thomas Banks?" "Yes." Thomas's voice sounded hoarse. "Have you seen your wife this morning? Mrs. Olivia Banks?" Thomas acted surprised. "No, we, had a fight last night. I thought she was spending the night at a friend's house." The officer's face remained impassive. "Your wife has a friend on board?" Thomas hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe she does. We've met a lot of people these days." "When was the last time you saw her?" "Last night, after the holiday dinner," Thomas answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "We had an argument and she left. I went back to the cabin alone." "Did anyone see you after the quarrel?" Thomas shook his head. "I went straight to bed. Was drunk." The officer made a note in his notebook. "Mr. Banks, a passenger reported seeing a woman resembling your wife fall overboard around midnight. A search operation is underway. You need to come with me to the captain's office." Thomas felt the ground slipping from under his feet. Someone saw everything. Falling overboard? He feigned shock. "That's impossible. Olivia couldn't have—" "Please follow me, sir," the officer said firmly. The captain's office was filled with people. The captain himself, a large man with a gray beard, the ship's doctor, a few more security officers, and the Coast Guard on a video link. On the monitor screen was a map with the marked location of the ship at the time of the accident and the calculated trajectory of the body in the water. "Mr. Banks," the captain pointed to a chair. "Have a seat. We have some bad news." Thomas slowly lowered himself into the chair, clutching his trembling hands. "What happened to my wife?" At 23 hours and 50 minutes, a passenger reported seeing a man fall overboard from the upper deck. The captain spoke in an official tone. An alert was immediately issued and search protocols were initiated. The ship changed course, rescue boats were launched, and Coast Guard assistance was requested. He fell silent, looking Thomas in the eye. "About an hour ago, a Coast Guard helicopter discovered remains. Preliminary reports indicate it's your wife, although a formal identification is required." "Remains?" Thomas felt nauseous. "What do you mean, remains?" The ship's doctor stepped forward. "Mr. Banks, these waters are home to a large population of tiger sharks. Unfortunately, the body was subjected to significant damage." Thomas covered his face with his hands, feigning grief. In reality, he was trying to hide his fear. Sharks. He knew about them. He'd read the brochures, listened to the safety briefing. He knew, and he pushed her in anyway. "Do I need to ID her?" he asked without looking up. "The remains will be taken to the morgue at the nearest port. We'll be there in 4 hours," the captain replied. "In the meantime, we need to ask you a few questions. Standard procedure. The interrogation lasted more than an hour. Thomas repeated his version. They'd had a fight. Olivia had left. He'd gone back to his cabin and gone to bed. No, he didn't know where she went. No, he didn't go up to the upper deck. Yes, they were actually celebrating their 25th anniversary of marriage. "What were you two fighting about?" one of the security officers asked. Thomas hesitated. Should I tell him about Philippe? But then he would have a motive. It was better to hide it. "Because of stupidity," he finally answered. "I drank too much and became jealous of other men. I had no reason, just alcohol." The captain nodded. "We'll question all the passengers who were present at last night's dinner. Perhaps someone saw where your wife was headed." Back in the cabin, Thomas collapsed on the bed. Someone saw the fall. Someone had reported it. That meant there was no explanation for the accident or suicide. There would be an investigation. A real investigation. Going over yesterday's events in his mind, he remembered that he'd burned Olivia's notebook in the sink. Ashes. He rushed into the bathroom and was horrified to find black flakes in the drain. Grabbing a towel, he wiped the sink thoroughly, washing away all traces of the burned paper. They were met at the port by police and FBI officials. The case of the death of an American citizen on a cruise ship automatically fell under their jurisdiction. Thomas was taken to the local police station, where he was placed in an interrogation room. An hour later, the door opened, and a middle-aged woman in a strict suit walked in. Her short, dark hair was neatly styled, and her penetrating gaze seemed to see right through Thomas. "Mr. Banks, I'm Detective Eliza Carter, Special Agent in charge of the FBI." She sat down across from him. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Thomas mumbled. "Tell me about your wife," the detective asked. "We were married for 25 years, Thomas began. "Olivia worked as a literary agent. We have a son, Jason, who's in Europe doing research." "Have you contacted him yet?" "No, I don't know how to tell him that." Detective Carter nodded with understanding. "We can help with that. In the meantime, how has your relationship with your wife been lately?" "Normal," Thomas shrugged. "Like most couples after so many years of marriage. We've been busy with our careers, not seeing each other as much as we'd like. But we decided to take this cruise to celebrate our anniversary, to be together." "And what went wrong?" Thomas took a deep breath. "I drank too much at the dinner party. I got jealous of other men. We had a fight, and Olivia left. I thought she just wanted to cool off, be alone," he stammered. "I never realized she could—" "A witness claims to have seen a woman matching your wife's description on the upper deck around midnight," Carter said. "Was she alone?" "I don't know." Thomas shook his head. "I haven't seen her since the altercation. The interrogation went on hour after hour. Elise Carter methodically built a chronology of events, asking the same questions in different ways, looking for inconsistencies in Thomas's testimony. He stuck to his version, trying not to get confused about the details. "Do you know a passenger named Philip Ray?" the detective suddenly asked. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "Yes, we met him on the ship. He's an old acquaintance of Olivia's, a literature professor." "How long have they known each other?" "I'm not sure. She mentioned they met at some book fair about 10 years ago." "And you weren't bothered by their friendship?" Thomas tensed. Should he have been? Eliza Carter tapped her pen thoughtfully on her notebook. "Mr. Ray claims he hardly knows your wife. He says he met you by chance at the casino and exchanged a few words. Is that true?" Thomas realized that Philip was trying to distance himself from the situation, to hide his connection to Olivia. No, they had definitely known each other before. Olivia had introduced him as an old friend. They'd even had lunch together the next day. "Interesting," Carter made a note. "Why is Mr. Ray lying about this?" "I have no idea." Thomas tried to look puzzled. "Maybe he doesn't want to be involved in a tragedy." After hours of interrogation, Thomas was allowed to return to the hotel. He was exhausted physically and emotionally. The next few days became a nightmare. Identification of the remains, paperwork, endless interrogations. He contacted his son, who was devastated by the news, and immediately flew to the States. Detective Carter kept up. She interviewed all the passengers and crew members, collected surveillance tapes, and studied phone records. On the fourth day, she called Thomas back in for questioning. "I have some new questions, Mr. Banks," she said, laying out the photos on the table. "This is the security camera footage from the corridor leading to your quarters. It shows that you returned to your quarters at 22:30 and left again at 23:35. Thomas froze. He hadn't accounted for the cameras in the corridors. "Yeah, I went out to get some air. I needed to clear my head after the fight." "Where exactly did you go?" "Just out on the deck. I don't remember exactly. I was upset and drunk." "The top deck? Where your wife was last seen?" "Maybe." Thomas shrugged. "I really don't remember." Elise put another photograph in front of him. "The camera at the elevator picked you up at 23:45. You were going up to the upper deck." Thomas felt sweat beading on his forehead. "Okay, yes, I was going up there. I was looking for Olivia to apologize for the fight." "And did you find her?" "No. I went around the deck, but I didn't see her." Detective Carter tapped her finger on the third photo. "And this is the footage from one of the upper deck cameras. 23:52. You're talking to a woman who looks like your wife." In the blurry picture, Thomas stood next to a female figure by the railing. The faces were indistinguishable, but the silhouettes were recognizable. "Yeah, I forgot about it," he mumbled. "Yes, I found her there. We had another fight, and I left. That's the last time I saw her." "That's not what the witness says." Carter leaned forward. "He saw you push her overboard." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "That's a lie. Who is this witness? Why is he accusing me?" "The witness wishes to remain anonymous," the detective replied. "But we have other evidence. The camera analysis showed that no one left the deck after that scene except you. And the medical examiner found bruises on your wife's body consistent with a violent jolt." "They could have been bruises from the fall," Thomas objected. "Fingerprints were found on her shoulders," Carter continued. "We're waiting for the results of the comparison with yours." Thomas realized he was cornered, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. "It was an accident," he said quietly. "We had an argument. I was drunk. I grabbed her by the shoulders. She stumbled and fell. I didn't mean it." Eliza Carter shook her head. "We have one more thing, Mr. Banks." She placed the printouts of the messages in front of him. "This is your wife's recovered correspondence with Philip Ray. It appears they were having an affair, and you knew about it." Thomas's heart sank. He thought he'd erased all traces. "Where did you get this?" "Mr. Ray confessed everything when we showed him proof of his lies. He admitted to having an affair with your wife and planning to leave together after the cruise. He also said that Olivia was afraid of your reaction." Thomas closed his eyes. The game was over. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" Carter's voice sounded soft. "You discovered their affair, followed your wife onto the deck, and in anger pushed her overboard." The silence lasted for several minutes. "I loved her," Thomas finally said, looking down at the table. 25 years, half my life, and she'd been planning to leave me all this time, used our anniversary cruise as a cover to meet her lover. I just, snapped." "Are you confessing to the murder of Olivia Banks?" "It wasn't planned," Thomas continued, as if he hadn't heard the question. "When she said she loved him, that she was going to leave, I just pushed her, without thinking, without wanting her dead. It was a moment of rage." Eliza Carter nodded to the officers at the door. They walked over to Thomas, helping him up. "Thomas Banks, you are under arrest for the murder of Olivia Banks. You have the right to remain silent." Thomas was led away in handcuffs. As he passed the waiting room, he saw Philip sitting on a bench with his head bowed. Their gazes met for a moment, the gaze of the murderer and the victim's lover. In his cell, lying on the hard bunk, Thomas thought about the last 25 years of his life. How he'd met Olivia, how they'd fallen in love, how they'd built families and careers, how they'd gradually drifted apart until they were almost strangers, and the moment on the deck when it all came crashing down. One moment of anger had crossed a quarter of a century and ruined 3 lives. Outside, it was beginning to rain. Droplets pounded against the small window of the cell, reminiscent of the waves splashing against the side of a cruise ship. A sound that would haunt Thomas Banks for the rest of his life.